Paris is a city that is known all over the world not only for its history, architecture, and culture, but also for the fact that millions of lives are intertwined in it, often remaining unnoticed. On every street and in every alley, you can feel the breath of this great city. Its history, its inhabitants, its daily worries and joys. In the heart of Paris, in its quiet and cozy neighborhoods, life flows slowly and without fuss. This was also the area of the 19th arrondissement, where 12-year-old Lola Daviet lived. The 19th arrondissement of Paris, located in the northeast of the city, combines the unique flavor of local life, cultural diversity, and green spaces, creating a unique atmosphere. This is an area where modern buildings are adjacent to traditional Parisian houses, and everyday life is bustling in cozy streets filled with shops, markets, and cafes. The area is also known for its diversity of cultures. People of various nationalities live in the 19th arrondissement, which creates a special atmosphere of cosmopolitanism. This is reflected in the wealth of gastronomy, from traditional French bakeries to restaurants with African, Middle Eastern, and Asian cuisine. This area, with its apartment buildings, calm streets, and classic Parisian architecture, has been home to Lola since childhood. She had lived here most of her life, and it was hard to imagine that life in this area could be anything other than calm and measured. Pedestrian paths surrounded by trees, family cafes where residents chat over a cup of coffee, created the very atmosphere of coziness and comfort that everyone who lived here loved so much. Johann and Delphine, Lola's parents, have always been there for her. Johann worked as a concierge in the very house where they lived. It was a job that allowed him to stay at home and keep order, as well as be close to his family. It was a quiet but important element of their lives. His working days were not overloaded with responsibilities, and he was always home on time to have dinner with his daughter and wife. Working in one place, he saw a lot of people, but always tried to keep his distance, remaining an attentive and decent person. His house was his fortress. Delphine, in turn, was a housewife, and her life was entirely devoted to her family. Lola was always the center of her attention. Delphine was a woman who radiated warmth and care. She always knew what needed to be done to make her family's life comfortable and happy. Her caring hands were always ready to hug Lola, help with homework, or just talk about how her day went. She tried to create an atmosphere of stability, love, and security around her daughter. Lola was born on July 18, 2010 in the small French town of Bethune, surrounded by quiet landscapes and the charm of provincial France. Since childhood, she's been a cheerful, energetic child who has always been able to attract the attention of others with her smile and kindness. Lola's parents remember her as an active and purposeful girl who showed amazing perseverance in achieving her goals at a young age. The family moved to Paris when Lola was only a few years old. She quickly got used to life in a big city, which charmed her with its views, atmosphere, and endless possibilities. Lola entered Georges Brassens College, where she proved herself not only as a diligent student, but also as a talented athlete. A special pride for Lola and her family was her passion for sports aerobics. She devoted a lot of time to this sport, having achieved significant success. Thanks to her hard work, discipline, and passion for what she loves, Lola became the French aerobics champion. This achievement earned her not only awards, but also the respect of her peers, teachers, and coaches. Lola's life was full of dreams and ambitions. She planned to continue playing sports, dreamed of one day representing her country on the international stage, and also thought about a career where she could help people. Despite her young age, her confidence and love of life inspired those around her. She grew up in such an environment, among caring parents and surrounded by the simplest but warmest things. This was a child for whom there were no difficulties that could not be solved, thanks to the love and support of her parents. Everything in her life was quite predictable and calm. Those were her days. She woke up early in the morning, went to school, returned home, did her homework, and walked with friends in the yard. Her every day was filled with light and joy. and it seemed that nothing could upset this balance. After school, Lola spent time with her friends, walking along her favorite streets and discussing school news, movies, and other events from their lives. In these moments, when they all gathered together, Lola felt that her world was not only unlimited and full of the brightest and most wonderful possibilities, but everything changed in one day in this modest and quiet corner of Paris, where, it seemed, nothing could shake the usual harmony. The events that followed robbed her forever of the serene and joyful atmosphere she was used to. It was an ordinary Friday afternoon in Paris, when Lola woke up early, as always. The morning was clear, the sky was cloudless, and the city seemed ordinary, full of familiar sounds and movements. Paris on this day was the same as it was every day for its inhabitants, calm, measured, immersed in their daily worries. Lola was going to school. Her school backpack was neatly stacked next to the door, and her mother was packing breakfast in the kitchen. Everything was fine. The morning, like most children, was full of worries about small things. As always, she couldn't wait to meet her friends at school, share new stories, and laugh. The girl was an ordinary 12-year-old schoolgirl, living in her own small, cozy universe, which did not portend trouble. She dressed quickly and ran to meet the new day. She left the apartment and said goodbye with a smile to her mother, who was going to do household chores. There was nothing to foretell that this day would be the scariest in her life, and later in the lives of everyone who knew her. Lola followed the usual route to school, as she had hundreds of times before, but this time, something changed, and no one knew what it was. The school was not far away, and this morning her path was no different from the others. As always, she passed by the very houses where her neighbors went out on the balconies and the children played in the sandbox. But she didn't come home that day. As the day drew to a close, her father began to worry. Lola was supposed to come back after school, but she still wasn't there. At first, he thought that maybe she was late for a walk with friends or decided to stop by the store. But as time went on, the anxiety began to grow. He tried to call his daughter several times, but the phone was unavailable. Something was wrong. The usual route, the usual time. And my daughter still hasn't returned. His heart sank. Lola was a responsible child, and it was not in her nature to linger without warning. He started looking for her around the house, then through acquaintances, but she was nowhere to be found. No one in the area saw anything unusual. As always, the children went home after school, the teenagers smoked on the benches, the adults went about their business. But no one could have guessed that Lola's path that day led to the wrong place where she was expected. On October 14th, 2022, at about 4:30 p.m. local time, the police station received a missing Lola report. Her father, Johann, anxiously reported that his daughter had not returned home after school. The family's excitement was getting worse by the minute, because Lola had never stayed late without warning before. This moment was the beginning of a tragic story that stirred up the whole of France. Lola's parents, confused and scared, could not find an explanation for her disappearance. From that day on, not only an intensive search for the girl began, but also an investigation that led to frightening discoveries and touched the hearts of millions. Law enforcement forces immediately began arriving in the 19th arrondissement of Paris. At first, the police concentrated on searching the surrounding streets, checking for familiar places where Lola might be. The first efforts of law enforcement agencies were aimed at establishing the last places where she was seen, at possible conversations with friends and neighbors. Everyone began to realize that such a disappearance was not commonplace, and the situation was becoming more and more alarming. In the morning, Lola went to school, and in the evening, she was still not there. With each passing hour, the possibility that she was simply lost or did not have time to return home became less likely. The police organized a search operation in the surrounding areas, interviewed witnesses, and soon began checking CCTV cameras installed in the building and surrounding areas. One of the cameras filmed in the entrance of an apartment building showed a woman entering the building that very day. On the recording, she was captured with Lola, heading towards the main entrance to the building. This has become a key element in the investigation. Further searches focused on establishing the location of this woman and searching for traces that could lead to the girl. Gradually, with each new step of the investigation, it became clear that the disappearance could not have been accidental, and events began to take an increasingly gloomy turn. During the search, which lasted for several hours, attention was focused not only on the building itself, but also on its surroundings. Inside the house, on the ground floors, near garbage cans, and in places where people usually did not look, thorough checks began. It was necessary to eliminate even the slightest possibility until it was known exactly what was wrong with Lola. On the morning of the next day, the efforts of law enforcement continued. At that moment, the police received information that one of the residents of the house reported that he saw a woman similar to the one on the camera recording with a container that she was dragging down the street. Before this remark could be confirmed, another chain of events broke out. At night, when the search reached its climax, the girl was found. But the place where she was found shocked everyone. Her body was found in the courtyard, where for many years, people walked along familiar routes, talked, and continued their lives. It was not just a courtyard, it was the heart of the place where Lola used to happily play, go to school, or return home. But now this place has become the epitome of tragedy. The girl's body was hidden inside a plastic container that stood in the corner next to the trash cans. Once they were near the container, the police quickly realized that something was wrong. Outwardly, it looked like an ordinary package for things or garbage, but inside, there was a terrible reality that changed the whole picture of what was happening in a matter of minutes. It is difficult to imagine the feelings of parents who were informed about the discovery, immersed in an endless whirlpool of pain and shock. The emptiness that comes at first envelops everything around, reminding that life will never be the same again. The investigation was just beginning at this place. The police did not know all the details at first. The insanity of the discovery was not obvious, which led them to believe that something more than an accident was hidden here. When the investigating authorities arrived at the crime scene, the atmosphere around the apartment building in the 19th arrondissement of Paris was anxious and tense. Local residents who had just learned about the terrible find continued to stand at the windows, and some tried to see what was happening through the fences. The police surrounded the territory with a special tape, highlighting the danger zone, where at that time work was already underway to collect evidence. All actions took place with special attention because the investigators had too little information and every step could be decisive. First of all, attention was focused on the container in which the girl's body was found. He was standing near the garbage cans in one of the most ordinary corners of the yard, but it was here that all the attention of the police soon turned out to be focused. The container contained details of the crime, hiding the terrible circumstances. When the experts began their examination, it turned out that not only Lola's body was found inside, but also some additional items. Among them were 2 notes, one of which was written 0 and the other 1. This strange fact has attracted considerable attention. What did that mean? Were these numbers messages, or were they part of some hidden code? All these questions have remained unanswered so far. In addition, the investigators paid attention to the surrounding area. The courtyard where the body was found seemed to be a familiar place. There were no signs of a struggle or damage around. At first, it seemed that Lola could just disappear, and finding her in this place would be unexpected. But now, after the container was discovered, everything seemed to be a crazy fantasy of a sick person.
Child, she is a 24-year-old homeless woman with no criminal record. On Monday evening,
Despite the lack of clear evidence at the crime scene, the surveillance camera played a crucial role. The police were able to identify the woman who appeared on the recording as Daviet. The woman, according to law enforcement agencies, had no permanent place of residence and was known for her unstable mental state. However, until that moment, no one knew about her possible connection with Lola's disappearance. At this stage of the investigation, the police began collecting information about Daviet and her possible contacts with other people. Daviet B. was born in Algeria and moved to France legally in May 2016, having applied for a student visa. According to the investigation, before the tragedy, she had no criminal past and was not held accountable. However, in 2018, Daviet was registered by the police as a victim of domestic violence, which left an imprint on her life. These facts only added to the inconsistency of her portrait, since in official documents her path before moving to France looked quite ordinary. Nevertheless, subsequent events showed that her internal struggle with personal injuries and unstable emotional state could have played a decisive role in the tragedy. Daviet was in a difficult life situation. She had neither a job nor a permanent place of residence. She was temporarily staying with an acquaintance in Val-de-Marne, then with her 26-year-old sister in the 19th arrondissement of Paris. According to her sister, Daviet often made strange and illogical statements, which also became known to investigators. As it became known later, there was a conflict between Lola's mother and Daviet earlier, which began in the house where her sister lived. Lola's mother, who worked as the caretaker of this house, refused to issue a pass allowing Daviet to enter the apartment unaccompanied. This failure, it is assumed, could be a trigger for further events. But despite her emotional instability, Daviet had no history of contacting psychiatric services, and after her detention, experts recognized her as sane and capable of participating in investigative actions. Early on Saturday morning, just a few hours after the police finally confirmed the identity of Daviet B., an operation was organized to detain her. The police surrounded the apartment, which, according to reports, she could be in. The operation was carefully planned, as the alleged perpetrator could be dangerous. After all, as it turned out later, she did not have a permanent place of residence, and her mental state left many questions. When the police broke into the apartment, Daviet B. was found in a state of extreme nervousness. The suspect did not try to escape, but her behavior was extremely strange. She tried to explain her situation, but her words were incoherent and inarticulate. The police immediately took her into custody and took her out of the apartment, escorting her to a patrol car that was waiting for her on the street. Interestingly, at the time of the arrest, the woman did not try to justify herself or dispute the charges. She just remained silent, and her eyes, filled with fear, spoke for themselves. It seems that her mind was so overwhelmed that she could not comprehend the seriousness of what was happening. The questions that the investigators asked her on the spot remained without specific answers, but one thing was clear: there was no clarity in her head, and her behavior was becoming increasingly inadequate. That night, Daviet B. was taken to the police station for more detailed questioning. Under her coat, which she did not take off even in the car, the police found several items, among which were personal belongings and handwritten notes. It soon became clear that these notes partially matched those found on Lola's body. The interrogation began with questions about her stay in the area on the day of the girl's disappearance. Daviet B., as before, could not clearly explain why she was in this place. In her statements, she mentioned organ trafficking and the help she allegedly sought, but these words seemed devoid of logic and made no sense in the context of what had happened. Investigators soon came to the conclusion that her words were not only absurd, but also indicated emotional instability. The police were sure that she knew more than she was saying, but continued to avoid direct answers. Several hours of interrogation did not lead to the necessary results, and the investigators realized that they were faced with an extremely difficult case. However, even so, all the evidence pointed to her as the main suspect. The surveillance video, her behavior that day, and even her previous remarks all confirmed her involvement. When the case came to trial, society in Paris was gripped by shock and anxiety. The murder of 12-year-old Lola shocked the city, causing a wave of outrage and fear among residents. Not only the girl's family and friends, but also everyone who knew about the incident, expected that the trial would be fair and unbiased, despite all the confusing circumstances.
Her lawyer is pushing for a mental health assessment.
At the beginning of the trial, Davie's mental stability remained the main issue. She continued to be in custody, and the investigation continued to claim that her actions were not only inexplicable, but also dangerous. At the court hearings, she appeared in court accompanied by her defenders, but her behavior remained as strange as at the time of her detention. She was silent, did not make any requests, and her gaze remained blank and detached, as if she did not realize where she was. From the very beginning of the trial, the defense tried to draw attention to Davie's mental state. Throughout her life, she faced difficulties, including depression and periodic psychosis, which, according to lawyers, could affect her ability to adequately perceive what was happening. Experts who testified in court confirmed that the woman had signs of serious mental disorders, including antisocial tendencies and a tendency to emotional instability. However, during more in-depth medical examinations, it became clear that her mental state did not absolve her of responsibility for what she had done. Lola's parents and members of the public insisted on strict punishment, not taking into account her illness, pointing to the terrible circumstances of the crime as well as the fact that the woman could understand the consequences of her actions. It was important for them that the murderer should be punished as he deserved, regardless of his mental state. During the trial, all the collected evidence was presented, which convincingly confirmed the involvement of Daviee in the murder of the girl. The surveillance cameras that recorded her with Lola in the building became decisive evidence of her involvement. In addition, the victim's personal belongings were found on her body, as well as notes, which confirmed her participation in the preparation and commission of the crime. Witnesses also played a key role in the trial. One of them was a neighbor who told about his observation of Davie's strange behavior on the day she left the building with the container. Other witnesses confirmed that they had seen her in the area, and one of them even claimed that the woman was trying to find a partner for illegal business, which added additional complexity to the case. However, the most important moment in the trial was the testimony of the accused himself, although there were very few of them and they did not have much logic. Daviee claimed that she remembers the events of that day as a dream, as if it were not real. There was confusion in her testimony unrelated to the actual facts, which once again called into question her ability to behave rationally.
Pupils at the girls' secondary school paid tribute to their former classmate. People in the neighborhood expressed their horror at the murder.
The defense tried its best to prove that Daviee herself had been a victim of others before, which affected her mental state. They argued that she had no real opportunity to make an informed choice, which, in their opinion, significantly mitigated her guilt. During the trial, the lawyers also tried to point out that her mental disorder had not been properly diagnosed and had not received the necessary treatment in the past. Thus, they argued that the woman was not fully responsible for her actions. The judge, considering her condition, could not ignore the possible influence of psychological factors. However, the analyses and testimony in court demonstrated that Daviee, despite her disorders, was fully aware of her actions at the time of the crime. The expectation of the verdict inflamed the situation, and the public closely followed every step of the trial. After months of legal proceedings, meetings, and analysis of all the evidence, the court finally handed down a verdict. Daviee was found guilty of murdering 12-year-old Lola, as well as of abusing her body. At the same time, her mental state was taken into account, which was recognized as severe but not so disturbed as to release her from responsibility. French Minister of Justice Éric Dupond-Moretti made an important statement to the National Assembly related to the case of Daviee. Since Daviee had no criminal record, her case was considered under the standard procedure. Instead of being placed in a detention center, she was ordered to leave France voluntarily within 30 days and return to Algeria. However, this order was never executed, which added acute issues to the work of the migration system and its control. The minister also noted that previously Daviee was not listed in police databases as a suspect or a violator of the law, but was registered as a victim of violence. This data has added complexity to the assessment of her profile. The government's decision became the subject of discussion in society, where many considered the sentence insufficiently strict, given the enormity of the crime committed. Many expressed concern about the state of the society that has been affected by this tragedy. Lola's parents said they would fight to ensure that the perpetrator was punished as he deserved, despite all sorts of excuses. There was no forgiveness in their eyes, despite the mental state of the accused. The story of Lola Daviee has become one of the most painful pages in modern France, leaving a deep scar in the hearts of people. This girl's life, full of dreams, joy, and light, was cut short suddenly and cruelly. Lola was a symbol of innocence, warmth, and hope that she gave to her family and friends. Her smile, her successes, and her love of life are now only in the memories held by those who loved her. This is a tragedy that has not left anyone indifferent. It caused not only the bitterness of loss, but also the desire to find answers to questions that sound painful. How and why could this happen? And although no court decisions will return Lola to her parents, this case makes us think about how important it is to protect the most valuable thing, childhood, and the safety of children. Lola deserved a long, happy life full of joy and achievements. Let her name be a reminder that every child deserves love, care, and peace. And may her light continue to burn in the hearts of those who knew her, inspiring the world to become a better place for the future of children.